Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for another webinar on Hannon Hill's webinar series of 2024. This webinar is brought to you by Hannon Hill, creators of Cascade CMS, a platform designed to simplify your web content management, and Clive, a web personalization tool that enables your web visitors to realize a unique personal experience, enhancing their engagement and retention. For the next 60 minutes, our speakers will walk you through best practices on how to integrate human-centered design into your recruitment and retention strategies. Our speakers today are Robynne Lofton and David Poteet from NewCity and Graham Lewis from Hannon Hill. Please note that this session will be recorded, and we will send a link with the recording in the upcoming days. There will also be a live Q&A at the end of the session, so please feel free to drop your questions in the comments below. And with that, let's get started with the introductions. Graham, please kick us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. My name is Graham Lewis. I'm the senior sales engineer here with Hannon Hill. I've been with the company for 9 years, but prior to working for Hannon Hill, I was the webmaster at a regional university in the state of Alabama. So I worked there about probably 8 or 9 years. So that's almost 2 decades experience in higher ed, working both in marketing and in IT. I'll be taking over the second half of the webinar and talking about Clive and just web personalization.
Thanks, Graham. I'm David Poteet. I'm the president and founder of NewCity. We're a digital agency that's focused in higher education, clients all across the country. And my background is user experience, content strategy, service design. So I'm kind of the human-centered design side of the story today. Robynne?
Yes, and hi, I'm Robynne Lofton. I'm the Director of Enrollment Strategy with NewCity. I have been with NewCity for 2.5 years, thereabouts, but spent 26 years serving enrollment, both admissions and financial aid, at 5 different colleges and universities. I'm excited to speak with you all today, and I thought I'll just jump right in and acknowledge that there is so much about the work in enrollment that becomes second nature to you. Our cycle tends to give us a steady rhythm of the highs and lows of the year. And I know there is one thing that we can all agree to, that no matter how long you've been in this profession, that very foundation we have held on to for so long has been significantly challenged this year. And if I'm being honest, over the past several years. Demographic shifts that are regionally impacting enrollment, shifting political tides to be expected with presidential elections on the horizon, and the persistent questioning of the value of higher education. It's been truly overwhelming. However, though we've experienced those challenges, I've also witnessed some real triumphs. I have seen such resilience in people, renewed commitment to service and equity, innovative practices being used that fall outside of higher ed, and shifts from admissions-only ROI to institutional responsibility for the success of both enrolling and retaining students. With all that we've been through this enrollment year, it is fair to say that there is enough environmental pressure, both mentioned and unmentioned, to suggest that we revisit the things we thought we knew. You know, as enrollment leaders, we rely heavily on the ability to set things up quickly, get them to a functional level, and pivot to the next fire. But if we know that the people in the machine are not only different, but that a great many things have changed in their pathways to higher education, what then are the gaps that we have caused by not circling back to these assumptions or long overlooked services? Graham, if you want to forward the slide there. Thank you. There are gaps in our families' experiences and how they access information, and how they come to know the institutions that we represent. Since joining NewCity, I have had the opportunity to daily incorporate research into my enrollment practice. And at every turn, I find myself asking if maybe we need to really go back to what we know. Maybe that which was good is no longer good enough, or maybe we need to rethink those student connections and ask if they're still relevant today. I have had the opportunity to witness those aha moments where what we assumed was always working or made sense to us not be understood or even useful to the student we intended it for. And so this is truly the right time to rethink and revisit the spaces in between our known and all too familiar efforts, to mind more carefully the journey to college and what our audiences are thinking and feeling and doing, and the many ways in which they experience our institutions. So let me offer an example of where those assumptions were challenged. Graham, we were working with the Cornell School of Continuing Education, focusing our efforts on their pre-college program. The pre-college program was looking to bolster its enrollment, but it was also an integral part of the university's overall enrollment strategy. When the project was taking shape, the widely held assumptions that, yes, these students were academically strong, but despite their younger age, they would mostly be focused on the traditional undergraduate stuff, what's inside their major and what's the student experience going to be like. Basically, serve them in the exact same ways as an incoming first-year student. But through our research in qualitative interviews, we found that the students and their parents were really interested in faculty. A behavior mostly witnessed by graduate students, and I mean deeply interested in who these faculty members were. Students and their parents wanted to know who they were. They cared deeply that these faculty members were instructors in both the summer classes and the traditional program, that they in fact noted this as the biggest differentiator between Cornell's pre-college and cheaper options. And that research helped define a blueprint for our work with Cornell that made sure we positioned faculty more prominently, and that we clearly communicated that the courses were 100% faculty-led.
Next slide, Graham. Yep.
One more forward. There we go. At this stage in my career, I get to bring my expertise in enrollment strategy, knowing how to identify and speak to an audience and help them navigate the complexity of process and policy, leveraging a host of data inputs like you see here. And I get to bring all of that to a partnership with our user experience teams and their focus on users' goals and experience-related pain points and intuitive processes, and their leveraging of an entirely different set of data points. I have had the unique opportunity to witness the power of those two areas combined and merged together, and the insights that come from it. When we combine an enrollment practice with human-centered design, we can tap into new areas to not only challenge our assumptions, but allow us to attend, more importantly, to the very gaps that our assumptions have created. David?
Yeah, so Robynne's talked about her journey and just the experience of seeing how some of these human-centered design methods, ways of thinking, when married to more traditional enrollment strategy, kind of research insight methods, can help to find those gaps. And when you're revisiting assumptions, there's some straightforward research practices, methodologies that really help to surface those gaps, identify the opportunities. So I'm just going to take you through briefly and show you a little bit of that approach, and we're going to look at the idea of personas and journey maps in particular. But these are some of the common tools that we'll use on the human-centered design side. You know, we're looking at analytics, so there's quantitative data that we're looking at. Understanding visitor behavior from analytics, we might look at in-page engagement through heat map tools and that kind of thing. We'll run surveys of various sorts to understand top tasks, kind of get a sense of how our audience segments break down. Then we will, as we move deeper into the audiences that we really want to understand, where we need to understand the nuances of the journey, there's really no substitute for those one-on-one interviews. And if you can, actually getting a chance to sort of watch a student or parent doing something, going through the process during your actual interview with them. And you know, one of the things that we've seen, there's a lot of data out there that is reported or that's presented, and there's all kinds of studies that are done every year by different groups that serve higher education, that it relies heavily on surveys, and that's a self-reported, you know, response by students. But what students and parents and everyone else, anytime you do research, what people say that they do in a survey or respond to in a survey is not always what they actually do. So there's just a tremendous insight that you can get from qualitative research when you have a chance to observe people through usability tests, through interviews, through actually just watching them go through the journey. So this is just an example of some work that we did. We use a tool called Dovetail that we load these transcripts from our interviews, the recordings from our interviews, and we'll go through and we do, it's the technical term for this is called grounded theory, but we're coding interviews. And Graham, if you'll hit next, and I'll kind of bring up a zoom in on a couple of these. So for example, this one is a parent interview, and so I'll ask, like, you know, how did your kid enjoy it, or do you know anyone else who goes there, or do they know professors? And we'll tag that with like determining fit, assessing professors, assessing culture. So that these are little insights into what's going on inside of a parent's head when they're at this stage of the journey, while they're kind of walking this journey alongside their student. Another one, here's a student talking about, you know, I'll add it to my list, and then afterwards, which I haven't done in a while, is I'll take them off the list. As I'm like, well, why would I go to Penn State if Oglethorpe is better? Or why would I go to Tulane if University of Georgia has what I want and it's easier to get into, it's closer to my fit? So these kind of things are starting to give us a real insight to how they're thinking, what they're, so we tag that with making my list, what niche they're looking into, determining fit. And we can start looking at patterns of comments across all those things. So yeah, go ahead and take us to our next slide. So one of the ways to take all that data, because I mean, obviously that sea of interview content and those little snippets is overwhelming. And one of the ways that we try to distill it in a way that's useful to like the web teams and the enrollment teams is personas. So I want to talk about personas a little bit. I'm relatively confident that all of you have heard of the idea of personas before, but there might be something I'm going to tell you here that will challenge a little bit of what you thought, or kind of give you a moment of aha. So persona is described as if it's a real person, right? Represents a subset of your target audience, and it's a group of of a subset of that audience that have some similar goals and motivations. It's derived from contextual research data, not assumptions that you have about your users. It's not an average, but it's a specific character, and it's used to promote shared understanding and empathy across all the people that are shaping your brand experience. Go ahead, next slide, Graham. One thing that's super important is that personas are not market segments or user roles. And I see a lot of folks will do this. Like, we have an alumni persona, we have a student persona, we have a donor persona. Those aren't personas. Those are just market segments, audience segments. So go ahead, next slide. And I've got the. So we will, there's lots of different ways to create a persona and what you want to present based on how you're going to use them, but we will often put together kind of a quadrants of a thinking and feeling, what's important to this person, hopes, dreams, what's influencing them, what are they hearing, what are they motivated by, what do they want to get out of this, and what are some pain points and obstacles. So that's just some common elements. Go ahead, next slide. it is important to distinguish between a user persona and a marketing persona. And a lot of what we do in human-centered design and web strategy for higher ed actually falls into both, but they are different. So a user persona kind of looks at the user's motivations, their behaviors, how we help them succeed and win. But a marketing persona is more about product market fit, like who's most likely to purchase, or who's most, when a university does market research to determine if a new degree program is meeting a need, or what demand is out there that would inform what new degree programs we should be offering, or how we differentiate ourselves as a regional campus of a larger, statewide public institution, all those things. Right. Next slide. Another thing that can be really helpful when you're figuring out what should our personas be, I mean, I've got all this data, I'm going to organize it in some way, is to actually think in spectrums. So there are going to be parameters that are important differences in behavior, and there are going to be differences in the kind of content you need to give to that user. Figuring out what a few of those parameters are, and then making sure you're creating some personas that cover different places on that spectrum. So in this case, this is a analysis that was done for a PhD program in education. Okay, so doctorate of education program. And so we have a spectrum for what's their background in education. We have a spectrum for, like, are they really focused in this case on Northeastern University, or are they looking at lots of schools? What's their experience doing online? Because this is an online program, okay? So limited, or is it extensive? Are they apprehensive? Do they prefer, or they actually like the online platform, right? And then we look at some of the things that could factor into their decision to get a doctorate. So with each of those kind of low, middle, high, we've put a few words in about, what makes someone fall into this end of the spectrum or not. Okay, so this helps us as a framework. Okay, now we're going to create personas that go on that framework. If you go to the next slide, and this is a different one than that slider here, but within each spectrum, then you kind of look at, okay, which characters are we creating, and where do they fall on that spectrum? And I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting enough with the personas I've decided to use based on my research, that I'm getting good coverage of those ends of the spectrum. And of course, those spectrums should be reflective of the research that you shouldn't be making up spectrums. They should be things that you're seeing in your data. So yeah, this was from a study that user interface engineering did a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, but they were surveying companies and organizations that use personas, and they found that 95% of the personas people used were made up. And so we would encourage you to not do this. It's fine to start out with some guesswork as a hypothesis, but then go out and do the research and see what validates. Because as Mark Twain says, next slide, supposing is good, but finding out is better. He was a smart guy, that Mark Twain. So here's some example of some behavioral personas that we might use for university, like a highly involved parent, okay? College degree, high income, that's one type of parent, not a first generation parent in this case. And then that parent's child, right? So, kind of creates a little bit of a connection there. And then here's another one, might be a prospective pre-professional undergraduate with strong interest in physical therapy. So it's very specific, but if I figure out how to serve that student well, I'm going to also answer some similar questions for other students who have that same pattern. And then like a prospective doctor of physical therapy student, a rising college senior. So we're going to take a look at one of these. These are some examples of personas. This is the parent. Next one is the student, and the next one is this high school junior or senior who's thinking about going on to he's taken an undergraduate course, but then he knows he wants to go on to graduate work, professional program in physical therapy. So each of these personas we'll take a look at. One of the things that we'll do is take that persona on a trip, take that persona on a journey. So journey maps or experience maps, you've probably heard of that too. This is a simple breakdown of what would go into one of those personas, but across the top, you've got a timeline that shows kind of the stages of the journey. We'll usually break it down into what are they thinking and doing, what are they feeling, and what are our ideas and opportunities kind of at each stage of that journey. So next slide. These are examples of the stages that we typically use at NewCity for the prospective student experience or parent. So considering and exploring, kind of inquiring and investigating, applying, seeking funding, you can read. So yeah, if you go to the next slide, just shows an example of a virtual whiteboard where we've done a workshop with people from the admissions team and going through and mapping out a lot of the things that we've either learned from data or getting insights from admissions counselors about what they see happening with the students that they talk to. And I should say, by the way, using your admissions counselors or anyone else that's interfacing daily with your students is valid research, right? We don't like to only rely on that, but it's very valid insight into the student experience. So that's not just making up personas, but we do like to actually talk to students and make sure that they're informed by that. Okay, great. So these are for those same 3 personas that I just showed you: the parent, the student, and then the other high school student who wants to kind of do pre-professional. These are each of them paired to a journey map, and we're going to take a look at one of them a little more closely. Go ahead. And before we do that, I do want to show, this is an example of another thing that's similar to a journey map, but it's actually taking and mapping out what's going on behind the scenes to make that experience possible. So in this is called a service blueprint. It's not, don't let anyone kind of use these two terms interchangeably, because the experience map really focuses on the customer experience. Here, that's represented in that top row, the student journey, okay? But in a service blueprint, you're going to add these extra layers where you're saying, like, what's going on with the admissions counselors? What's going on with the website? What are all the pieces that have to be in place and working well together to deliver that student journey that we want them to have? This one is for graduate student enrollment depiction. And so if you go to the next slide, we'll just kind of zoom in, you can see just a little bit more detail of what's there. And you can see we've come up with, we're just trying to visually represent during the consider and exploration stage, what are some of the questions that students asking? Is more education the path to my goals? That's a question I've got. What schools or programs might I consider? I need to get some advice about this. I've got some tests I have to take. These are important things, like I got to take my GMATs, what have you, depending on the program I want to go into. And so thinking it through like this and then drawing these other layers, you can go to the next slide, helps us think about what are we doing with digital marketing at this stage to support that? What kind of content does our website need to answer those specific questions that student has at that stage of the journey? Where are those opportunities? Where are we dropping the ball, right? Where are the gaps, as Robynne says, to mind the gaps? Go ahead, next slide. So this is an example of that Theo persona. He's a high school senior. He is looking at the undergraduate program that he's going to choose, but he wants to go on to do a pre-professional program. And he's also thinking about maybe doing a couple of years at a local school and then transferring someplace and finishing that way. So there's a bunch of things going on with Theo that if we can answer Theo's questions well, we're going to actually help a lot of our student population. Go ahead, next slide. So the big question then becomes like, all right, this is cool. I'm a UX nerd, so I think this is amazing, and I can think about all the website content I need, but how does it help an enrollment leader? And so Robynne's going to take back over and talk to us about how any of this is useful to her.
Yeah, I love a good so what, or how can I use this question? When you consider a singular persona and their journey, you can, for example, in enrollment, you can choose to fully dive in and address every aspect of engagement and pain point that you see sort of produced here along this sort of horizontal line. Or my preferred approach is to step back a little bit and look for the maybe incremental spaces where I can make change for the better. If you consider Theo's pain points across his whole journey, I can manage my resources better and decide what is most impactful for my team and then measure those specific outcomes. I have not, in my time in enrollment, have not always had the money and resources to make sort of big sweeping changes, create new portals to hold all the answers for the Theos of the world. But if I could direct my attention to a singular stage like perhaps that of yield, and maybe devote my team's energy and on those questions that are in those boxes you see. And that particular window of time, perhaps we can invest more in the areas that would help convey a sense of belonging for him. A map like this allows me to take bites, not just bites, take informed bites that can really impact students in my specific funnel. And those small things can change attitudes and perceptions, and frankly, more importantly, their behaviors.
And would you
When I'm, go ahead.
Go ahead and zoom into that next slide, because I know Robynne wants to illustrate some of the specifics here. Go ahead, Robynne.
Yeah, yeah. When I'm doing my job in enrollment, as I mentioned before, everything's on fire. I have big things to get done all the time. Recruitment is a big lift. An application review is an even bigger lift. Making sure you're making appropriate budget decisions is also a big lift. But if you can turn the tide for a critical audience with small things, you can make a difference overall. Again, Theo is representative of Theos in your funnel, and there's a lot of opportunity there. If I had this document at my previous institutions, and say we were focusing on transfer students as a priority for the year, I would have given this persona document separately to both my director of admissions and my recruitment staff. And I would have asked them from their perspective to look for places where they think that they can make a difference for Theo. In your area of responsibility, can you dig into these questions that are here in those yellow Post-its? Or are there new Post-its we should be asking, new questions we should be asking ourselves about how we might be able to address their needs? And then we could document that. Once we implemented that little piece, we can then document that and then ask Theos at the end of the journey if they experienced that and if they liked that. And we could talk about how we felt about offering that service. Giving this to my team in that way empowers them. And it's not top down. It is used to empower the people from their expertise to participate in the solution and to really genuinely make an impact on the students in my funnel. Those team efforts can spark solutions in areas within their purview and beyond. The conversations that we facilitated with our clients, you can go ahead to the next screen there. The conversations we facilitated with our clients, Oklahoma State University on the Oklahoma City campus, not only gave them a better insight into some of their own internal processes, but it also supported our work that we did here in improving their website content. All of the content changes that we brought to their web pages came from informed data, leveraging the feedback from their teams, and those insights derived from the personas and the journeys of their specific students. So now I'm going to take a step back here and turn things over to Graham.
Yes, sorry, I could not find my unmute button. So let's kind of talk how we take this information and actually affect the user experience on the website. And basically that's content personalization. So I like quotes as well. So I pulled this quote: 94% of organizations experienced a rise in conversion rates after personalizing their websites. So, we see content personalization all the time. So as we're searching things, we see other maybe apps that we're using, websites that we're using. We see what we're searching in one place showing up throughout our journey on other websites. And what we can do is take that information and just how visitors are experiencing our website and personalize their experience from there. So what does that accomplish? What does tailoring content on your website accomplish? It's going to give you an improved user experience. It's going to enhance recruitment efforts. It's going to help retain. So it's going to support retention. It's going to boost fundraising and alumni engagement. And it's just going to give you an overall competitive advantage. We know that website visitors, well, they know what they want. We know how to give them that information. And what we need to do is make sure that we meet them in the middle. So to do that, there's two aspects of content personalization that we're going to talk about: implicit personalization and explicit personalization. Let's start with implicit. Implicit personalization uses data gathered from user actions. These are things that both Robynne and David talked about in the beginning. Just overall interaction, how they're browsing, their click patterns, time they're spending on your website, just overall behavior metrics. It's gonna so like user profile, adaptive content, and it's going to be unobtrusive. So basically, as the website visitor is experiencing your website, the content is just going to shift for them. And then here is an example: a university website that suggests content to a visitor based on their search history. And here's that example. So on the left, you'll see just a basic admissions page with just some general content. On the right, my visitor searched for scholarship information. So you can see a blurb right there. It's in pink, but it shows up: don't let financial barriers hold you back from achieving your academic goals. So basically, by taking the fact that my website visitor searched for scholarships, I was able to just provide helpful information. The idea, especially with implicit, is to not make them give you information. We're just going to be learning. And then finally, we have explicit personalization. Now, this is going to be a little bit more direct. Explicit personalization relies on information that users actually provide to you. And that the easiest way and the most effective way is via some type of form submission. This way, the user has a little bit more control. And it's going to be a little bit more accurate since they're actually telling you all the different information that they're looking for. The information that you can provide to them is going to be a little bit more, I guess, on the nose, but it's just going to be a little bit more accurate. And here is an example of that. So a university website that updates page content based on how a visitor filled in a preview day form. So if we look at this example, on the left is a call to action, asking you to sign up for preview day. So it takes you to a page, you fill out the form, you've signed up for preview day. So now on the right, this is when you go back to the homepage. So there's really no reason to ask the website visitor to sign up for preview day again. Now that we know that they filled in the form, they've said that they are coming to preview day, we can give them more information. So they told us that, let's just say they're a prospective student. We can let them know that the application deadline is approaching. Again, being able to tailor that content a little bit more direct for them since they provided us a little bit more information. I really liked the people in the machine concept that Robynne was talking about. I like that way of looking at just kind of the overall persona concept, the people that are visiting your website, the segmentation of those users. So let's talk a little bit about segments and kind of how that relates to Clive, which is a content personalization tool that we at Hannon Hill have that kind of works not only alongside of Cascade, but it can really work with any content management system. Segments, basically, segmenting your users is a fundamental aspect of personalizing content because it's going to enhance your relevance. By segmenting users, organizations can tailor content that resonates with interests, needs, and challenges. And challenges, again, is something that Robynne and David both talked about in the beginning. And by kind of taking the challenges that these different segments, these different people in the machine face, we're able to improve that user experience. And then just from a strategic marketing and messaging segment, it allows all of the messages to align. Segmentation ensures that marketing messages and content are aligned with the user's stage within the journey and life cycle. And then it's just going to also just increase the effectiveness of marketing campaigns. Most marketing campaigns are designed for specific segments, and this is going to improve effectiveness and ROI by focusing on the nuances of each group's behavior and preferences. So let's just kind of talk about a few different types of visitors that may visit your website. So we've got graduate students, undergraduate students, online students, and non-traditional students. So just looking at these 4 different types of segments, there's a lot of things that we can think on and just personalize based on these 4 types of website visitors. So just look at graduate students versus undergraduate students. Things that you might do to a graduate student, you may not say to an undergraduate student. You know, an undergraduate student may not talk the same way that a graduate student talks, or online students may not need the same information as students that are going to be on campus. Same thing as non-traditional students. All of their needs are going to be different. They're individual people. So as we personalize the experience for these different types of website visitors, you know, we need to take into account all aspects of the visitor type. So, you know, let's think on the visitor Thea that they were talking about earlier. What do we know based on a website visitor? We're going to know their location. So Clive is going to be able to pull in their geographical location. We're going to know that at least this visitor is a freshman planning to transfer with a program interest in physical therapy. So let's look at, as they hit the website, what are we able to start utilizing? Their geographical location, their browsing history, their search history, and then maybe they're coming at your website from an email. So a lot of times admissions teams, marketing campaigns will send out email through something like your CRM, and that email is going to have a link that's going to drive them to your website. Based on them clicking that link within the email, we can actually assign them a segment at that point because we know that they are coming from that specific email. If that email was targeted to a specific audience or segment, we can then automatically assign them into that segment and then build on that as they interact with the website. So let's talk about building these segments. So within Clive, you can build in segments based on multiple rules. So you can do explicit attributes. So if they filled in specific information, if they filled in a form, so that preview day form that we looked at earlier, if they filled in that form, I can just simply hide the call to action to them filling in the form. If they said that they were a undergraduate student, incoming freshman, in Theo's instance, he would be a transfer student. We can start personalize the content based on that. We've got geographical location, if they visited a URL, if they searched for a term, when their last visit was, or how many visits that they've had. Are they a recurring visitor? Are they a first-time visitor? But we can build these different rules out to really narrow down the focus of these specific segments. So, hi, I'm Theo. Let's keep it simple. The overall idea of content personalization is to just keep it simple. A lot of times people try and really get specific, get overly complicated with their content personalization. Keep it simple. It's the easiest thing to do is start switching out what is most common. What is the most simple thing that you can switch out? What's going to be the thing that that visitor needs the most? So think on the student type. What kind of content on your website is going to be affected by the student type? So let's just say your student is an incoming freshman. We know that they're an incoming freshman. Type of content that's going to affect: housing, meal plans. Do they need to come to orientation? So if we know that they're an incoming freshman, we can start giving them information, because the housing requirements for an incoming freshman versus a sophomore, junior, or senior may be different. Freshmen may be required to have meal plans, so that messaging could be different. Do they need to attend orientation? You can start presenting the content based on that. Okay, the program that they're interested in. If we know that they're interested in a specific program, we can use content personalization to highlight student stories. We can translate and show different images. We can update the fees that they're presented. Again, just changing the content on the website based on things that we know. We don't need them to have to look for the information if we know where that information needs to go. And then again, geographical location. That's going to affect housing. That's going to affect tuition. If they're an out-of-state student, their tuition is going to be different. If we know they're an out-of-state student, it's going to be more likely that they're going to need housing. We can also personalize things like their admissions counselors. If you know that they're from a specific state, we can personalize the content based on that. So if we know that we have specific counselors for specific states, we can show the content to them. So, how do we do this? Where do we go from there? And within Clive, we create smart content. Smart content is a live content snippet you can use to create calls to action, A/B test, or personalized callouts. And again, what the smart content does is it enhances the relevance of the content on the website. Since we know that Theo is a prospective out-of-state student, we can use smart content to give him more specific information. And then providing that more targeted content, he's not going to have to search for the information. We can provide that information to him. We know that he's an out-of-state student. We can give him information on housing. We know that he's interested in a specific department. We can give him more student stories, more information on the faculty, things like that related to that department. Now, let's kind of wrap up the personalization part and just kind of talk about all the pieces that can make this specific segment. Theo visits the website from an email from admissions. He lands on a landing page. That landing page has a form. It also has a Clive snippet that's going to pull in his geographical location. And then from there, as he's interacting with the website, Clive is going to basically snag and capture those page views, and that's going to lock in a much more specific user segment. So let's just say the email linked him to a landing page for the department that he was interested in. It made him request information maybe on faculty, and then we know he's an out-of-state student. We can then put all of that together in one user segment. So one final slide about content personalization, just kind of break down what we talked about. Don't overthink it. Every visitor needs something specific, and then use what you know to provide what they need. David, I think there we go.
Thank you, Graham.
You couldn't find your mute button either.
Thank you so much. So, now we've taken a look at how enrollment and web/UX leaders can bring their perspectives together, right? To revisit assumptions about the students and the families that we want to reach, and to organize our research in a way that makes it directly applicable, not just for content strategy, but for admissions campaigns and processes. And to form these insights into a plan with tools like Clive for engaging students and families in a more personal way that shows that we are listening, that the site itself is starting that listening for us, and that's helping to create a sense of the experience of your brand that says we're responsive to you, that we're listening to you, that we're here for you, and it ultimately is building stronger connections and helping people, drawing people into your story. They want your institution to be part of their story and who they're becoming. And so that's what the vision that we have, to see these three things come together well. And we really thank Hannon Hill for inviting us to be part of this this presentation today. So we'd love to take all of your questions. We've got several already in the chat. So Chris is probably going to start calling them out for us. We do have a few things. Just, of course, encourage you to reach out to any of us in email. We've got links here to a page on Hannon Hill site and a page on NewCity site with some kind of follow-on resources as well. And if anybody's going to be at High Ed Web, I'll put in a quick plug. Robynne and I are going to be speaking at High Ed Web on teaching web teams to speak enrollment. And we're excited to be kind of continuing this mission of bringing these two spheres together. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. This was a really great presentation, Robynne, David, and Graham. Thanks for that. We have a couple of questions. Here's the first one. Is for Robynne or David. James Wood asks, we have a very small staff and very limited budget. We are looking for ways to address this important information. Have you used AI to help create persona, journey maps, etc.? And if so, how happy have you been with the results?
Yeah, I'll take that first, Jeremy. Thank you. We have experimented with using some large language models to create personas just to see what it would come up with and how realistic they looked. They're pretty rudimentary. I mean, they're going to be fairly generic in that sense. We are Dovetail, that tool that I mentioned that we use. I mean, there's no substitute for doing the work of talking to people. You can't get AI to go out and talk to people and interview people for you. AI tools are getting better at being able to look at patterns in the data and help you see what the trends are that would inform those personas that you create. I don't think we're at a place where I would trust an AI model to go and make the actual personas, and certainly not the journey maps for me. But these things, I totally get what you're saying. With small staff, most of our clients are doing this with pretty tiny staff. So, sometimes they'll bring in an agency like us or, a number of others to help them with that stage, but that doesn't mean you can't do any of this on your own. The Dovetail tool that we're using does have AI built into it now for looking for patterns, looking for kind of helping you highlight insights. And so it's not quite as manual, labor intensive to analyze the data, but we just, if nothing else, we'll pull our data together, pull a bunch of transcripts together, get people in a room or in a virtual whiteboard, and we create the journey maps as people read through the transcripts and pull things out. I mean, there's Goldilocks. There's small, medium, and large levels of of how to approach this. It's not something you have to do a Cadillac version to get anything out of it. Robynne, did you?
Yeah, I think I'd just add that the real value in those personas and the resulting journey maps are that they are your students. They are not a best practice of a first-year student, right? They're not a generalization that is what the AI is typically serving up. They are really insights derived from folks that are experiencing your funnel, experiencing your counselors, your recruitment methodologies, all those kinds of things. And there's real power in them. But I think to David's point about the Goldilocks approach, there are ways in which that you can scale some of this that allows you to, again, manage your resources. Maybe you can't do a big and wide scan, but you can talk to your students, engage with your audiences in a purposeful way that helps you get to some of this content and its usefulness in your overall process.
Very good. Thank you so much. We have another question from Katie Beth Allen. She asks, how useful would personas be in the context of a full site redesign? Would you say that leveraging personas is more impactful in creating targeted content or in the context of an overall site design?
That's a good question. We don't always use personas in a full site redesign. Like, we are going to look at the research data and we're going to look at something more akin to like a task map or mental models or something that says like, what's the universe of questions that our audiences have? How do we organize those in smart way? How do we create navigation that gets people to the answer, to the thing that they need to be able to do? So we're still using some of we're doing the same kind of qualitative and quantitative research. We may still do journey maps, but we might not create 4 different audience personas. It depends. It really does get more powerful as you start thinking about how you're going to create segments for your marketing, for your enrollment campaigns, and for personalization. Robynne, Graham, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
I just to piggyback on what you said, David, I would say the real I sort of a critical part for me in working with a full website redesign, that journey map is where it's at, because we get to hear what the perspective is of the student journey when we're doing these stakeholder conversations, and then seeing what your content actually says the journey is, and then we, testing your users through that journey. That becomes really insightful. It informs content. It informs navigation, as David mentioned. It informs areas of opportunity, areas of lack, that you can address in reorganizing and structuring and rebuilding a website. So, yeah.
Yeah, and from my perspective, as you go through redesigns, that's the perfect time to kind of rethink not just the design itself, but just the overall content itself. So as you're looking at the design, as you're rethinking the design, and those designs are kind of being presented, rethink how the content's displayed. What content within this different region can be affected by content personalization? One of the things that Clive can do and most personalization tools can do is A/B testing. So if you wanted to see which element is going to be the most effective, and you have different versions of those, we'll test them. What's going to be the most effective? What's going to resonate with your visitors the most? Don't be afraid to try something, and if it doesn't work, you pivot. That's the beauty of web design. It's instant failure, instant gratification. It's either going to work or it's not. You just republish and you pivot, and we discuss this at Hannon Hill all the time. Websites are never finished. You try one thing, if it doesn't work, you keep going. But that's the beauty of it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Graham. Cindy asks you a question. Is personalization done anonymously, or have the users have to log in first?
Yeah, this is totally anonymous. When a visitor hits the website, especially from a Clive perspective, they're tracked as a visitor, but it's an anonymous visitor, and all of their interactions are kind of tracked and kept just within an anonymous visitor profile. And this I saw another question that Winston Churchill Joel had posted. We kind of piggyback off of that. So his question was, with implicit, does it make sense to passively aggregate behavior data for a while and then figure out meaningful segments to act on? So as visitors come to your website anonymously, their behavior is being tracked. So I think it would be good to pick some random visitors and kind of see where they're going, see where their shortfalls are, see where they're stopping, where are they leaving, and a pattern is going to arise, whether it's a good pattern or a bad pattern. And at that point, people like NewCity and anybody that you're working with will take those patterns, and they'll be able to figure out, okay, we know that basically the journey is stopping here for most visitors. Why is that happening? And being able to have a tool like Clive that's going to allow you to kind of better visualize that visitor journey. It's just going to make your decisions a little bit more effective.
Perfect. Thank you, Graham. Kevin Wall asks, first he states, really insightful stuff from the NewCity crew. If we're considering a redesign that would go to an RFP requirement, do you suggest that this work be done upfront prior to an RFP or during that redesign process?
Well, yeah, and shout out to our friend Kevin at KWall. Good question. We prefer to do it as part of a bigger project. I mean, we do these as standalones when, but if someone comes to us and they've already done all of that research work, and then they're asking for a vendor to come in and just do a architecture and design based on it, we know it's just so helpful to get to be part of immersing yourself in listening to those students and other audiences, and really onboarding that research as part of the design kind of thinking process. So our preference, I mean, it's not the only way to do it, but our preference is certainly to be involved in the research and then carrying that forward. It also, I will say one thing that I like about doing it that way, if I know that I'm going to be doing research and then we're going to carry forward and do some design and content and other work based on it, I'm focused on that outcome, and I'm not just focused on my research as a deliverable. Like I'm creating this beautiful research piece, and it's great, but it's got to be useful. And so having that connection between the research and the doing keeps you honest about, is this persona and journey map beautiful, but can anyone do anything with it?
Right.
That's my answer.
And I'll just on a kind of along the lines of that, just something that we did. I worked at a very small institution here in Alabama. We did a lot of research and usability testing, not knowing that's what we were doing. That was very easy to do and eye-opening from our perspective. So what we did was we reached out to local high schools. We knew that our target at that point was we needed freshmen. We needed undergraduate students. So what we did was we met with local high schools. We went and met with their computer classes because we knew that they all had computers in front of them. We met with their junior, senior level computer classes, and basically went there and walked them through scenarios. We said, okay, go and find this. And what that allowed us to do was we could visually watch them find it, and we could see where they stopped, and we could see what issues they were having. And a lot of things come from just that. We had them read pages that we knew were content heavy, blah 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 pages and the marketing type, the fluff, the happy text, as a book that I like to read called it, cradled in the foot. They're not going to read that. And what it allowed us to do was we had information to go back to our administration and rethink things just from a content perspective. And where were they going? They were going to admissions because that's who they were talking to. So there are things that you can do just within your local area that aside from the RFP process and aside from working with companies like NewCity and that stuff, there are things that you can do that's just a simple thing to do within your area that would be just as effective prior to the RFP process to at least gather a little bit of information.
That's good stuff. Graham, last questions, 30-second answer. Considering Clive, how do you suggest one get started? You mentioned not to overthink it and keep it simple.
Keep it simple. I mean, there are aspects of things that you can easily change on your website that would be effective. Something as simple as, are they what state are they located in? Are they in-state, out-of-state? Your messaging should be instantly different. You talk to an out-of-state student differently than you talk to an in-state student. Are they an international student? Again, that's a very easy thing to target. Also, are they a returning visitor? Are they surfing your website? Are they searching for something specific? You could just grab the search term. If they're searching for financial aid, then they're interested in financial aid. Things like that are just quick wins. But geolocation is usually the easiest thing because that's the quickest target.
Very good. All right.
30-second answer.
That's great. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, David. Thank you, Robynne, for this insightful webinar. Like I said, we got the recording. We'll send it to you in a couple of days, along with the slides. We thank you, everybody, for being part of today's webinar. And please join us for our upcoming webinars. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.